Serious. What's your darkest secret? Story 1. Once, a lady ran up to me at a notoriously bad corner in town. I thought I knew her from around as she ran and hugged immediately. She backed off and started babbling incoherently. She is one of the many intellectually ill candy addicts of the area. A few minutes later, she does the same to a 50-ish-year-old guy. He gets very creepy with her, pushing her against a bus stop and stating in a dark, matter-of-fact manner, "You're coming home with me tonight." She is looking downward all the while, half in tears, mumbling, shaking her head violently while he gropes her. I am generally very disgusted by assault. An exchange student at my former school was violently assaulted in an alley. I had hyper-violent dreams of stumbling upon it happening and violently beating the man to death for months afterwards, and was very drunk at the time, so I start cow-talking him. He yells at me a bunch, and I back down. Then he grabs her by the wrist and starts pulling her towards the alley. I'm terrified, in tears, drunk, and very angry. She screams. I pull the whiskey bottle out of my bag, yell at him, and get hit in the face. I hit him back with the bottle. She runs. I hit him again, and he falls. As he was on the ground, I hit him with the bottle repeatedly. The last time it broke over his face. Then I gave him one sloppy and intentional gash across his cheek area, maybe hitting his eye a bit. I ran away crying, then puked. This is the only time I've ever been in a fight, and I've become a bit afraid of myself because of it. Story 2. When I was about 9, my dad got wrongly diagnosed with a couple different psychological disorders. His psychiatrist put him on loads of meds where I didn't even feel like he was there anymore. He was on cloud 9 and 24/7s. So that leads to this. My dad remarried to my stepmom, who had 3 children, 2 boys and 1 girl. I was 9 at the time, my brothers were 5 and 13, and my sister was about 7. My oldest stepbrother regularly molested and assaulted my younger brother and sister. This problem carried into a lot of other things. Assault, molestation between my 2 youngest siblings, as well as acting up. My little brother used to run around the house throwing cow. Yes, literally his own cow. He would do it as bad behavior, but would mainly do it when my oldest brother was chasing and trying to catch him. I'd wake up in the middle of the night to him touching them, telling them to be quiet. To this day, I just remember the look on his face and in his eyes while in the moment. I will never forget it. He was eventually put in juvie. My stepmom used to make me sleep outside on the ground. If I fell asleep inside, she would wake me up, drag me by whatever limb she could hold on to, and put me outside. No blankets, no pillow, nothing. 100 degrees or 25 degrees. Didn't matter. I was often locked out of the house when my dad was gone to work also. The minute he left, my stepmom would just make my life living hell. Physical and emotional abuse were typical. I bring up the medication my dad was on because he was no good dad and my best friend, and in the right mind, he would have never allowed that. He eventually went to a different doctor, got on different meds, and left her. But oh no, that cow was hell. I still remember the day it finally broke. My dad and stepmom were screaming at the top of their lungs, and my dad told her that he was going to leave her and told me to get my stuff. I jumped on the kitchen counter, got right in her face, and screamed, "Fire!" Edit. No, my stepbrother never touched me. Edit 2, spelling. Story 3, throwaway. I've always looked after my little brother and have stepped in to fill the role my dad left behind. I'm 26 and my brother is 15. One day my brother breaks down crying and I'm thinking, cow mom has cancer or a girl broke up with him. I ask him what's wrong and his response was that he wanted to be a girl. I laugh thinking he's pulling a prank like he does. Well, I might add, smart bad person, but he keeps at it. Usually he will break and admit it, but he didn't break this time. I was shocked and it felt surreal while we talked. We talked for a couple hours and I, loving my bro, was supportive and gave him information on being transgender, what information I knew anyways. He told me he hated pretending and wanted girls' clothes and all that jazz. Well, to wrap it up, whenever my brother comes to stay with me on weekends, he wears girlish clothing and makeup. I always refer to him as her, and he goes by Brittany. It weirds me out, but I see how much he enjoys being who he wants to be at my place. We still do the usual like video games and movies, but he stopped working out with me because he doesn't want to build muscle. So my little bro turns into Brittany on weekends and very much plays the role. His voice was pretty soft and gender-neutral to begin with, but trying to play up being a girl it's dead on, though there are hints of my brother in some words, he says. The worst thing about it is I never have the house to myself on weekends. He will always want to stay at my place because it's his favorite time, and I can't break his heart by telling him no since he's pretty miserable during the week. My bro passes for a girl pretty well, and I doubt most people would notice. I say he looks pretty as a girl. But if he starts taking hormones like he plans, he shouldn't have an issue. However, that all in the future because our mom would probably flip as she found out A, he wants to be a girl. B, I knew C, I helped him. I love my brother and consider myself his guardian. I try to be supportive even though it's weird. I'm pretty conservative. But it's my bro, you know? One more thing to add, took him to an amusement park this summer and he went as Brittany. He made a joke about people thinking we were on a date. It wasn't funny to me. The things I do for love. Story 4. When I was very little, probably around 3, 4, I used to play a game with my parents where I'd go to the bathroom and brush my teeth before bed. And when I got to my room, they'd pretend to be asleep, and I'd find creative ways to wake them up. Being so young, I thought my dad was superhero-style indestructible. And in thinking so, I decided to try something that would hurt a kid like me, but wouldn't harm him at all since he was big. I found a pencil laying on the desk and tried to stab him in the eye with it. Luckily, he was peeking and stopped me just before I did it. To this day, it gives me a sinking feeling in my stomach, thinking about what might have happened. Story 5. Okay, so typical sexually abused as child thing. My parents divorced and I was put into foster care, spanning either a year or a few months, kind of blocked out. I was about 8, this older kid named Richie was 14-ish, and a perfect example of a close relationship sadist. Lots of messed up stuff. Got handcuffed by him and held hostage until I yelled out for my foster mom, beaten. My head stood on once, sexually abused, forced to commit both violent and close relationship acts on the other younger foster kids in the home, subtle and manipulative death threats. You know, regular sadist stuff? Anyway, given that I'd say I could be doing a lot worse. But I worry sometimes. I've had multiple dreams in which sexually sadistic themes abound. Bloodied female bodies, women dying in the same way, that is being suffocated by a banana during oral intercourse. In the dreams, it's never me doing it. I'm always witnessing the act. In one of them, someone was trying to do this to my current girlfriend, and I murdered him via decapitation. I occasionally wake up and I'm like, rapishly aroused. My girlfriend will tell me of events that I don't remember. Me waking up and starting close relationship with her until she tells me no, and I go back to sleep. Anyway, it's troublesome to have attractiveness and violence seem so closely linked in my subconscious. Edit. Change name of prison-bound piece of cow. Story 6. Went to a strip club one night, unwilling I add. It was my second time at one of these establishments also. It was a few days before payday. I was almost broke. Went with a bunch of people I didn't know. Girls coming and going, giving me a table dance and flirting hard. The more I drank, the more turned on I was. One girl come up and say, $50 gets you in the back with me. I go in the back and she instantly takes my pants off, throws a condom on me, and we're having close relationship. After everything is said and done, she asked for more money. Not saying anything about a charge before the fact. Next thing I know, I'm in a chair in the main room with 2 bouncers, and the manager saying they're going to break both my arms and throw me in jail if I didn't get $300 now. Out of all people, I call my boss at the time. He shows up, pays the girl. Everything is settled, and he ends up getting a dance. Very few people know this. I've yet to go back to another strip club, nor want to. I was 21 at the time it happened, just days before my 22nd B-day. Story 7. I stole my stepfather's 9mm Glock, made sure it was loaded, put it in my mouth, and pulled the trigger. Had no idea that he'd taken out the firing pin in case one of us kids got a hold of it. My reason for doing it was his molestation of me from the time I was 14 to the time I was 17. I tried telling my mother, but she didn't believe me. Said I needed to be institutionalized for saying such a horrible thing about such a good dad. So I thought that she didn't love me. He loved me in the wrong ways. And everyone at school hated me. So why the hell was I taking up air? I'm better now, but some mornings I still hear him creeping up the stairs. I live in a completely different town, with a loving boyfriend, but it's no difficult to just let go. Story 8. When I was 11 years old, in 2006, my little baby sister drowned in my backyard swimming pool and passed away while I was at my father's house on the weekend. I was very close to my sister. I loved her with all of my heart. My mother often talks about how she misses my sister, and I agree with her. There is only one problem. I have almost no memory of my sister. My mom does not know this, and I do not know why I have such a hard time trying to remember. I obviously remember what she looks like, but I cannot remember how she acted or how I acted towards her. I can only remember a few moments of when we were together. One of the moments was when I was swimming in the pool, trying to do backflips. Yelling out to my mom, "Mom, watch me!" My mom was holding my baby sister and talking to her, so she didn't hear me. I, being selfish and rude, yelled at the top of my lungs, "Stop babying her," and stormed up the deck and into the house. I have no idea why I can remember this moment, but not any good moments. There is this moment that I dream of all the time. As I was getting in the car, on the day she passed away, to go to my dad's house on the weekend, she jumped into the car and gave me a tight hug goodbye. I do not know if this moment happened or not, but it just feels so real when I think about it. I hope it happened. I have no idea if this is a dark secret or not, but it is a secret. A secret that I have almost no memories of a loved one in my life. I needed to get this out, thanks Reddit. Story 9. Funnily enough, I literally just told mine in another thread. Here's what I said anyway. I'm using a throwaway for this because I have friends who know my account. Well then, I must have been about 5 or 6. My memory is very hazy. And something happened between my sister, 4 years older, and I on 2 occasions. The first time would have been while we were staying at my grandmother's house and had to share a bed. We were, as some people would say, experimenting. My mind is a blur to this, though. The second time we were in my bed. I have no idea where my mom was at the time, or why my sister was in my bed in the first place. All I remember is my sister telling me to put it in, and we were laughing. I had no idea what this was we were doing, though. Oh, actually, I remember one occasion where we were, thank God, caught. We were again over my grandmother's house, but this was at daytime. She told me to lay on the floor, and she got on top of me in the 69 position while we were fully clothed. I didn't like this and wanted to get her off of me. Luckily, my great-grandmother walked in and shouted at my sister for being disgusting. I have never told anyone about this apart from my girlfriend, and when I brought it up to her, I was nearly in tears because it was so hard to say. These images were in my head for years, and I had to keep them in. Who could I have talked to about it without looking like a bad person? I've never brought it up to my sister. My girlfriend and I both agree that she probably remembers, though. Story 10. I don't think I've ever said this out loud before because it's so, oh no, weird, and people might think I'm more screwed up than I really am. But I've always wanted to get into a car accident. Like the type that gets you hospitalized and severely hurt. Whenever I drive, I just have this urge to drive straight into traffic or swerve into the opposite lane. People think I hate driving because I suck at it, but it's really because I have this huge urge every time I'm alone in the car. It's nagging. I'm in college now, and I take the shuttle to school, so I haven't been driving for a month or so. But whenever I'm in a car, I still have that craving. Edit. Clarification asterisk. It's crazy how many people are saying they know what this feels like. Now I know it could be due to intrusive thinking or l'appel du vide. Asterisk. It's not just the desire to crash into traffic. It's usually whatever's around me, say a tree or a railing. I know I have enough self-control for me to never act on these feelings, but it's just a nagging little urge in the back of my mind. Asterisk. I don't want to do it for attention. It's more like the adrenaline rush or maybe blatant curiosity. Edit French grammar, sorry guys. Story 11. I'm early 30s and I've never, ever told a single soul this. I lied, I had to. I was 12 years old and I didn't know what to do, so I lied. There was no other way for me to do it. When I was 11, my mother put me into a mental institution. I was angry, extremely angry. I was the atypical piece of cow unpleasant person angry child that was always in trouble with police and literally was always in trouble at school. By the time I was 11, I had 3 misdemeanors and 2 felonies. My felonies were arson and assault. I burned down a field hoping that would burn down an apartment building, and I attacked my teacher with a screwdriver, severely hurting her in the process. Looking back, all the trouble I caused my mother, all the suicide attempts, I don't know how she didn't just terminate me. I tried to rip my throat out with a coat hanger, overdose on pills, slice my wrists. I was angry, and honestly, there wasn't anything that caused it. No abuse, no neglect, nothing. I grew up in a poor, single-parent household. My older brother and I were latchkey kids. We came home from school, and then we were alone for about 4 hours until my mom came home. When I was institutionalized, I just broke. I became a monster. I had nothing to answer for, so I unleashed my rage on anyone and everyone. My first year, I spent a large majority of my time locked in the quiet room. Quiet rooms were rectangular rooms with rubber walls and floors. Basically, you could beat your head off the wall floor and not really hurt yourself. I think the longest stint I did locked into a QR was around 4 days straight. But I was in the QR at least half the week because of how angry I was. I stabbed employees with pencils, pens, attacked them randomly. My mood would shift instantly from gentle to raging. They would close down the floor and it would take almost all the staff to hold me down and move me to a QR. When I was almost 13, they built a new building to house us all. I was the second person to be moved there. I would spend the next 3 years there. I forgot to mention that my days that weren't filled with QR time were filled with therapy. Individual therapy, then group therapy, then lunch, then individual, then group, etc. Throughout this time, the therapists and psychologists had tried to delve into me and find the cause of this anger. Was I sickly, beaten, neglected? I denied all and tried to honestly tell them that I was just angry. At one point, 2 years into it, I had basically been talked into a corner. Every day I was asked why I was lying, who abused me, where did they touch you? 2 years of this, and every day I told them the same thing. I started shutting down. I was currently on a room program. I was confined to a room 24 hours a day. This room had no windows, only one door. I had started with a dresser and a bed, with a metal and wood bed frame, but because I had thrown the dresser drawers at employees and banged on the bed frame loudly, it was all taken away from me. I spent my day in an empty room. Literally nothing, just 4 walls and a floor and me. They had stopped all my therapies, only allowing me to go to 1 individual a day. I took my meals in my room and was allowed a 15-minute shower once a day. After 6 months of not seeing the sun, not being allowed to talk to anyone, and just generally being crushed, I broke. In therapy one day, I told my psychologist that I had sexually abused my brother, and that I had done that because I had been sexually abused myself. When asked who abused me, I told her that I used to sneak out of the house late at night, meet a group of people at the grocery store 2 blocks down, and go with them to parties where people took sweets, and I had happened to have been abused a couple times. Thinking back, I have no idea why I said it, but at the time it made sense. What happened next was, I think, worse than the previous 2 years. My mother and brother were brought into counseling, and I had to reveal, in front of my mother, what I said to the psychologist. My brother, who has cerebral palsy and is slightly intellectually handicapped, couldn't argue against it because he has no long-term memory. I apologize for my poor wording of this. I feel like I haven't spoken in 18 years, and I'm trying to remember what words go where. What followed was possibly the worst 2 years of my life. My story grew, as it had to. Daily therapies and constant questions pushed me to the point that I confessed to having multiple personalities. I had MPD for almost 2 years, and I remember one magical evening where we had a 4-hour-long therapy session, and 2 of the personalities left us. My mother and my brother, who I loved, didn't speak to me or see me for 2 years. No cards, no calls, nothing. I was alone. I lied because I had to. The pressure got to me, and I did it. No one knows. My entire family thinks that I sexually abused my brother. When I finally got out for the next 10 years, every time I was around my nieces or nephews, the looks I got, I feel almost empty. I don't want to read this again, so sorry if there's any misspellings or you don't understand something. Story 12. When I was very little, 3-5 years old, I sharted. This was before I had the wherewithal to know not to check for poop with my hand, which is what I did. I had no clue what to do, because my bathroom was right past my parents' room, and I thought I would get in trouble if they saw that I wiped my butt with my hand. I look around my living room, and I see my big speakers that were hooked up to the TV. These weren't the little speaker that go next to your TV, either. These things were taller than I was back then. The shelves we kept our cassette tapes on hid the backside of these speakers, making that the perfect place to hide some poop. The bad part isn't that I wiped my peach chocolate on these speakers. The bad part is that my parents bought a better TV that came with better speakers, so no longer needed the poopy ones. They generously decided to give the speaker to my cousin's family. It's been about 15 years since we gave them the poopy speakers, and it must have cursed their house or something. Their toilet flooded multiple times, spilling poop everywhere. Their dogs would leave big, meaty turds right in front of their TV. And you know how some little kids pee the bed? Well, my little cousin went through that phase, except for he would cow his bed on the reg. Even I fell victim to this poop curse, if you will, and I cow on their bathroom floor only a few months before they moved out. I had diarrhea and just barely didn't make it. My cousin's parents, my aunt and uncle, got divorced a few years back, and my aunt is now in possession of the poo speakers. 15 years later, she still has no clue what I did. Story 13. I had testicular torsion at young age, and one of my testicles had to be surgically removed. I was very young back then. Didn't know much, so I used to think I wouldn't be able to ever become a father. I'm all grown up now, and the other testicle works fine, and I masturbate almost every night. But it's a secret. I don't know how would a girl react if she knew I only have one testicle. And how the hell would I ever be able to bring this up to my future SO? Edit. Never thought this would get so much attention. I'd like to sincerely thank all of you for your kind and encouraging words. Felt kind of a banana that I underestimated women. You are a lot more understanding than I thought. Didn't new balls weren't such a big deal to women? Me and my dude friends are kind of misinformed. I've read all the comments and the PMs. It's proving a lot difficult to respond to all of you. But I'd like to tell you I've read all the comments and I'm honestly grateful for your kind words. I'm more confident than I ever was. Thanks again and my best wishes to you all. Story 14. Throw away for this because no one benefits from knowing. Hope it gets buried for my sake. When I was 18, I got suckered into being a legal adult for a Habitat for Humanity-style summer camp. About 10 hours of construction labor on a good day, and many were much longer. After a particularly long day and a death at a sister camp, the power went out at the church we stayed at. I got cornered in a stairwell by a guy that was much bigger than me and pretty brutally assaulted. He had clearly done this before. What makes this so difficult was that he was slightly younger, only 17 at the time, and as a legal adult, it was very clear that any kind of close relationship contact with campers was forbidden. It had been explained early on that even the rumor of close relationship action could be grounds for dismissal from camp, complete dismissal from the church, or even legal action due to an elevated position of power. As it stands, I'm afraid to mention this to the church for fear that they'll try to have me arrested. Story 15. Last year, my 3-year-old cousin passed away after a long battle with brain cancer. About 5 months prior, he was doing terrific. He was beginning to make a great recover after a surgery that supposedly got rid of the tumor causing the cancer. He did a lot of moving around and stayed in St. Jude's Children's Hospital. Like I said, he was doing great and all he wanted to do was play. And myself, being a sulky little teenager, wanted nothing of it. One day, he had an upcoming MRI to see if he needed more treatment. I remember being at school and thinking, maybe it wouldn't be so bad if they found something. He'd have to back to Memphis and I wouldn't have to deal with him anymore. It turned out they did find something, but the something they found was too much to treat. He basically wasn't going to make it past 2012. I was devastated and realized what I had thought earlier in the day. I know I wasn't the reason that his cancer came back, but it still makes me want to throw up whenever I think about it. It's been almost 9 months, and I still haven't told anyone. I want to, but I don't know if I would be able to contain myself if I did. I know it's not my fault, but in the back of my mind, I always seem to think it is. Story 16. Throw away because, yeah, this will probably get buried, and I almost hope it does. I'm a guy, and when I was in middle school, probably 6th grade, I had a pseudo-close relationship with another kid on my street. It was kind of strange how it came about. I had only just discovered masturbating within a year or two, and was doing it daily and was horny as fudge. But being only like 11 or 12, I had never had any close relationship contact with anyone. The kid, let's call him Tim, lived a few houses away and was a year younger than me. We'd hang out and do usual boy things, sports, pretend lightsaber fights, regular neighborhood exploring. I don't remember exactly how it came about, but I remember one day we were in my backyard and he had to go pee and went over by the bushes and I saw his banana. It didn't turn me on, it was just kind of ... intriguing. That night I was jerking it and thought about his banana and got off to it. The next time we were in my house alone in my room and talk, turned to close relationship stuff. And it eventually became an "I'll show you mine if you show me yours" deal, to which he said he'd only show me his if I sucked it, and I was floored. I wasn't boy and didn't think he was, but I guess he and I were in the same weird, horny boat. So he showed me his banana, I licked it twice, showed him mine, and he did the same, and then we just kind of stopped. The next time we were at his house, and I wanted to have him do it again and asked him. So we went in his garage, and he blew me. It was really awkward. He knelt down in front of me and sucked me off for maybe 3 minutes and didn't use tongue. But he groped my balls a few times, and I remember enjoying it. I made a point not to kiss him at any point because I didn't want my first kiss to be with a guy. Eventually, he stopped, and I went home, and he yelled as I was walking home, "And remember, don't tell anyone." And I proceeded to run home and furiously masturbate. I had a fantasy of having him over for a sleepover and full-on flipping him, but we kind of distanced ourselves after that and never really talked again. I saw him occasionally in high school, but we never talked. I'm not at all boy, despite this one occurrence, and have never given thought to being sexually attracted to men. As far as I've heard about him, he's never been with a guy either. But that was the only boy experience I ever had, and my first close relationship experience overall. And I will never tell another soul. Story 17. I was starting 8th grade. Hormones were hitting hard, and girls in close relationship were all I could think about. This would have been the early 90s, and the internet wasn't really around, but BBS were. I was pretty computer savvy and knew how to find local BBS, connect, and play around. Legend of the Red Dragon, anyone? I found a few that had multiple lines, so you could chat with others in real time, or leave messages for other users if they weren't there. My whole goal was to talk to a girl. I don't remember how it began, but I found one, and we began chatting. Developed over time, got flirty, and before I knew it, I was talking to her on the phone for hours at a time. Also, turns out she wasn't just a girl, but a woman, 32 years old. I lied and said I was 23. My voice was deep enough, and I suppose I was able to pull it off reasonably well. Also, she was married. Turns out her husband didn't mind. I didn't care. I was horny and young and stupid. I thought I was so smart to be doing this and getting away with it. Things kept progressing. Phone close relationship. Lots of phone close relationship. Almost felt like we were in a relationship. I wanted to meet her, but I knew my age would give me away. I decided to roll the dice and tell her I was 17. Still lying, but perhaps more believable. She was horrified at first, didn't talk for a bit, but I kept at it. Eventually, we struck things up again. I suggested we meet at a local mall. I met both her and the husband. I think we ate Chick-fil-A. It was quick, but a huge rush. Here's this woman I've been having phone-close relationship with for months. Apparently, they still believed my lie about being 17. I was 13 and barely that. We decided we should find a way to meet for an overnight visit. Early on, I had told her I was a virgin, true, and wanted her to be the one I'd lose it with. She seemed to like the idea. Her husband did too. I told my parents I'd be spending the night at a friend's house. My school had a carnival that morning, and I'd supposedly just go to my friend's place from there and get dropped back at my house on Sunday. Instead, both her and the husband picked me up at the school. I ran and jumped into the back of their car, ducked down, and we headed off. We had discussed tons of fantasies over our months of chatting, and our first few stops involved them. First, we drove out to an adult store I had seen by the highway, my suggestion. I stayed in the back seat while they went in. I can't remember what they bought, maybe lingerie, maybe a toy. Next stop was a Walmart. We picked out lingerie for her, whipped cream and a cucumber, yeah, I know. I still remember giggling as the cashier checked us out. We went to a nearby hotel in a nice part of town. Somewhere along the way, they offered me some alcohol. It was Bacardi 151. They said it was their favorite. I'd never really drank before, but this with cola tasted awesome and made me feel great. By the time we got to the hotel, I guess I was decently buzzed. They checked in, and they snuck me in through the side door. After some awkward chit-chat, she gave me a blowjob with her husband watching. I thought it was awesome. I also got to do all kinds of things to her, and I'd never even kissed a girl before. We took a break to go to a nearby restaurant and have dinner. I kept wondering if anyone knew how lucky I was. Went back to the hotel, and things went on all night. They kept offering me candy. I'd never smoked before. So I played it off that it made me sleepy and avoided it. We had lots of close relationship. They videotaped some of it. We took turns having close relationship with her. I couldn't believe it happened. He fell asleep and she wanted to dance with me. Come morning, they drove me back to my house. She sat in the back of the car with me, and I got to have a little fun on the way there. I was sad to have to go. They dropped me off down the street, and I walked up to my house and rang the doorbell. My dad opened it up and gave me a huge hug, crying, asking where I had been. Fudge. My parents had called the friend's house and asked if I made it there. They told him I never had been there nor had plans to be. My parents freaked out, rightly so, and called all my friends' families asking if they knew where I was. No one did. They called the police. I felt horrible. I had to think fast. I couldn't tell them where I'd been. My parents would hate me, and I knew it'd have legal implications for everyone involved. I lied and told them I met a dude online who was a hacker, and we met up so he could show me a bunch of hacking nonsense. As stupid as it sounds, I was really into computers at the time. Had tried to build some freaking boxes before, so it was sort of believable. I still refused to tell them who it was, but assured them I was fine and nothing bad happened. Still, they said I had to talk to the police. I went in the following day, got interrogated by 2 cops. It was kind of silly how much they stuck to the good cop, bad cop routine. They were actually pretty hard on me. I'd never been talked to or messed up with that way before. Still, I stuck to my story. Being the era it was, they had no clue about hacking, and I never told them who it was as I was protecting my friend. My parents took away my computer, my phone line, and all sorts of other privileges. This meant I couldn't call her at home, but I found a payphone and told her what had happened. We agreed to lay off for a while, Time passed, and I sort of lost interest in talking to them. I honestly just felt sick thinking about it. I didn't know if it was because we got caught, or how it made my parents feel, or what. I might call every few weeks, then every few months. Maybe 6 months or so later I called. Her husband answered. He sounded like nonsense, made some comments about being punished. I was a little unsure what to think. She came on the line. Turns out their young daughter, yes, they had kids, had wandered out into the street and was struck and terminated by a car. They said they believed it was punishment for what we did. The husband said he blamed me. Fudge. I never talked to them after that. I don't even remember their names today. Not sure I want to. I've always remembered this as being something I architected. Every step had been my plan. I was horny and smart, you see. Or was I? Now I wonder, how do you mistake a 12-year-old for a 17-yo? It was messed up any way you slice it, but what the hell really happened? I'm still not sure. Story 18. I'm a university student who got into a bit of a money crisis this summer. Did the whole panty-selling thing on Craigslist to make a bit of quick cash. Wasn't careful, ended up getting assaulted. The whole thing was pretty out of character for me. I'd never considered anything like this before, and I'd consider myself fairly innocent for a 20-year-old woman, in that I've only ever slept with 2 guys, and both within relationships. So the whole thing started as innocently as something this seedy could. But after messaging a lot of guys, I found out I could make a lot more money by arranging to meet up with guys and let them take the panties of themselves. This felt really shameful to do, but I was desperate at the time. I needed the money. So I went ahead and met with about a dozen guys, mostly older, middle-aged guys, and the whole thing was so uncomfortable. But I told myself, just think of the money. It'll all be fine and over in a matter of minutes. Then I had this one message from a guy who told me he would pay me £100 if I would come meet him around midnight as he was working late. I'd only ever arranged daytime meetings before, as I wanted to look out for myself as much as possible, given how dodgy the situation was. But this offer seemed too good to be true, and the meeting place was near a bar about 5 minutes from where I lived. There would be other people around, so I should be fine. Looking back, I don't know how I ever thought this was a good idea, but at the time I so desperately needed the cash, I somehow justified it in my head. So off I went, thinking this would just be a quick exchange. Some guy would get the panties he wants, and I would go home with the £100 I needed. I'd exchanged pictures with the guy before meeting, so knew who to look out for, and sure enough, I saw him in a car outside the bar, went to meet him, and he told me to get in, and we'd drive to somewhere private. He seemed so friendly and perfectly fine. Of course, in my head, I was still feeling wary, but I just thought as before, think of the money, it'll be fine. Fast forward a few minutes, we've driven off into a really secluded council estate, not the nicest of areas, and parked down an alleyway. Then he locks the doors, gets on top of me, and has his way, all the while covering my mouth to muffle my screams, not that there was anyone nearby to hear them. And the whole time, this guy keeps telling me, think about the money, babe, and I'll give you double if you just play along. It must have been the pure fear and shock that made me keep quiet and not struggle, and some stupid part of me was still just thinking about how much I needed the cash. I think that's the only way I could rationalize what was happening to me, almost like a coping mechanism, I suppose. So I kept quiet, played along, even though it was the most vulgar experience of my life and every fiber of my being just wanted to scream and kick out at this creep. And in the end, the illegitimate child still had the nerve to act like he was going to pay me, but had just realized he was out of cash. He asked me to get out of his car as he didn't want cum to drip over everything, while he drove to an ATM round the corner. I suddenly got a bit of my nerve back and started shouting at him like, did he expect me to believe he would come back? Complete nonsense. I knew as soon as we got down that alleyway that I'd been hoodwinked and wasn't getting anything out of this. I just got out of the car, though, in fear that he would get violent. I stood there in complete shock as he drove off. Then I sort of came to my senses and started completely bawling my eyes out, walking back towards the bar to find my way home. I guess nobody hanging around the bar really noticed my crying as anything abnormal. They would just think I'm some silly, drunken student. Got home, showered, cried myself to sleep. This happened in June. I've felt very off and depressed since. And this is the first time I've told this story to anyone. Good to finally get it off my chest, I guess. Story 19. Fudge it, no throwaway, not proud, but it happened. I was involved in an all-male threesome, just to see what it was like. Found out I was definitely straight. Edit, details. This was back in my young and wild college days. 18 to 22, when I had a profile on adultfriendfinder.com and would have 1 or 2 nightstands with strangers I met on there. Yes, they're actually asterisk or asterisk horny singles in your area. Anyway, I got a random message from a boy guy offering a blowjob, mulled it over for a few days, and being sixily experimental back then, I accepted the invitation. When I got there, he already had another playmate over. So this bi guy lays down on his back, head and shoulders over the side, has me stand in front of him and proceeds to start sucking my banana, upside down. Meanwhile, the boy guy gets on the bed and starts sucking the bi guy's huge cock. He looks up and offers me the banana. Want to try it? It's staring me in the face, hypnotizing, tempting. But I declined. He went back to sucking and stroking it. Changing positions, I lay down on the bed, and the boy guy got between my legs on his knees, sucking on me while he was getting messed up from behind by the bi guy, who was also giving him a reach around. Everyone came, just not all at the same time. He even let me cum in his mouth, but he spit it out. Nice guy, but I really wasn't into it. I had to close my eyes and imagine it was a female giving me the BJ in order to stay hard and finish. Story 20. So I was talking to this one girl a few years back. She lived in Florida. I'm in the Athens area of Georgia. We met a single time and it was wonderful. We really loved each other. Only thing is, she was extraordinarily clingy. She had been assaulted by her best friend in high school and he terminated himself after that happened. When we met was a little bit after that happened, so of course I helped her through that. She also had managed to lose her mother a week before her birthday, 9/11. So this is a lot to take in for someone who had just graduated high school. Anyway, so she had to take care of her little sister, who at the time would have been a sophomore, and her little brother, age 11 as well. So it worked out well for a while. One of her friends from work had been late on his rent for whatever reason and went through the trouble of asking me if it was okay to board with her and the brats for a while, so of course she didn't mind. And I told him that if he even thought about touching her, that I would eviscerate him and his soul. Well, he moved in. They were supposed to drop by during the summer right before our first year of being together. They went up to Michigan for some reason I can't recall, and well, her little sister was pregnant. She told me it was from her boyfriend back in Florida. She was told that she had a miscarriage, so they immediately headed all the way back to Florida. Skipped me completely. Turns out the baby was actually okay, so I got turned down for no reason. So I thought. Turns out that the baby was actually the work friend's kid. He assaulted the little sister and knocked her up. After all this cow, he also managed to assault my girlfriend and shoot her best friend in the leg and proceeded to terminate himself, leaving my girlfriend and her sister intellectually scarred and leaving his soon-to-be son without a father. Fast forward, baby arrives, gets named after me for whatever reason. Later on, my girlfriend actually terminated herself because of her life being so cow, and the fact that I literally couldn't do anything to help her other than be her mental support, which is definitely not my strong suit. Her little sister terminated herself not soon after that. She did leave the baby alone, thank God. But that only left her little brother, who was 12 at then end of all of this, and the baby dragon-lagging. The baby ended up in North Florida, and the little brother ended up being sent to Italy with her aunt and uncle, since he had almost no family remaining. Story 21. My dad used to eat me out when I was little. It started when I was 9. I had this robot book I really liked. He'd start reading it and slowly tug on my PJs at a key point in the story until by the end of the book, I was waist down. He'd make a little game of it, get me laughing, walking his fingers up my legs and then tuck his head in. He never penetrated me with his banana, though. It ended when I was 13 and he walked in on me eating out my BFF/GF-to-be. We chatted about it after awkwardly as could be expected. He said in a way, he was sort of glad I didn't have a BF, because he didn't know what he'd do if he found some other guy taking what he couldn't have or didn't allow himself to have. He said he just wanted to make me happy, and now that I'd found someone else, that was okay. No, I did sort of enjoy it. Then I went on to sleep with my friend's dad when I was 15 and messed up my history teacher at his summer cottage. I work as an upscale escort now, although I do work elsewheres too, and have trouble viewing close relationship as anything but a gift of physical pleasure, not necessarily tied to love. I don't know if that's wholly tied to my experience as a kid. Story 22. I was 8. I have a little brother with severe autism. He is 2 years younger than me. One day, my mom called to me upstairs and told me to bring my little brother downstairs because Sesame Street was going to be on. He does not talk but can walk, only very slowly. We got to the top of the stairs and started walking down. I got frustrated that he was walking so slowly and poked him so he would hurry up. Then a step later he stepped in my toes. Furious, I poked him again, telling him no. I scared him, however, and he moved his arm suddenly and accidentally hit me with his elbow. I shoved him in response. Unfortunately, he has very bad balance, so he went tumbling down the stairs, crashing headfirst into the wall. He didn't move. Terrified, I screamed for my mom and made up a story really fast about how he tripped and I couldn't catch him in time. An ambulance was called and he was rushed to the hospital. He had internal bleeding and almost passed away. He had permanent brain damage on top of his autism. His memory is even worse than before, and he will now probably never learn to talk. The worst part is, to this day, my parents thank me for being such a good big sister. Even when I bring that up, they praise me, telling me I acted quickly and it was obviously not my fault. But it is my fault, and I will forever feel guilty. Story 23. Not all that dark, but I've never told anyone my revenge story. When I was 10 years old, my mom sent me to a summer camp in another county. I knew 2 other people there, and we were placed in the same cabin. The other cabin was full of the locals who had been there previous years. I was a fat, awkward kid, and I got picked on all the time. This camp was no exception, but there was this one kid who was relentless. We'll call him Sam. Sam was always pushing me around, calling me names constantly. I wouldn't even eat if he was still in the lunch area. One day, we were in our cabin talking about how mean the other guys were, and I decided to seek revenge. I had to take a massive cow, so I grabbed this plastic grocery bag and filled it up. I took the bag to the other cabin while the other kids were out being cool. I found Sam's bunk, grabbed a pair of his underwear, and shoved it down in the bag. After squishing it up again, I put it under Sam's mattress with a little bit of it hanging out. By the way, the stench was horrendous. Relieved I hadn't been caught, I ran out of there and back to our cabin. When the bullies came back in from playing, we could hear their disgust. It didn't take long for Sam to be the new target of endless bullying. Nobody wanted anything to do with the kid, that cow himself. Guess who didn't get picked on for the rest of camp?